In this video clip, we're going to look at depth to learning. And what I mean by that is taking the learning process a little bit further than just what's necessarily happened. So what we find is a lot of PDIs focus, and even ADIs, focus a lot more specifically on just the fault that's happened. Yeah, the fault that the learner has made. And then they correct that fault and they put some kind of action to kind of preventing it the next time. But what they kind of lack sometimes is the change of scenario. So what would happen if the scenario was different? Yeah, and how would you react then? So by doing that, you create a bit more depth to the learning process. And a good example of that is cutting the corner. So we all know that we shouldn't cut the corner and that it's dangerous and we could smash into another car that's coming out. So we all know that. So when a learner driver goes and cuts the corner, people kind of jump on that and you know, they go down often a tangent, saying, you know, they shouldn't cut the corner and making sure you don't cut the corner, and, you know, maybe having a reference of when to turn to prevent that happening, and making sure you're looking into the new road to make sure, you know, you don't do that again. But you know what they quite often miss is, what if there was a parked car on that corner? What would you have to end up doing? The answer is cutting the corner. Yeah. So by focusing too much on the actual fault itself and making sure people don't do that again, yeah, then you don't quite then, you know, cover a situation where you might have to cut the corner. And in another circumstance, that would have been exactly what they should have done. So that's where again the depth to learning comes in, and making people just a little bit more aware of the situation could be different. Yeah, because in all honesty, we don't live in this perfect world of the highway code, because the highway code, big red letter, says must not cut the corner. But there's a parked car on that corner that shouldn't be parked there, but he is. We have to deal with it. Yeah, and there's nothing else we can do about it. We have to deal with that situation. So that's where again we're looking at more depth to learning. So when something happens, or when a learner driver maybe commits a fault or does something that's not quite right, think to yourself of another circumstance where that could have been right. And then you could, you know, you can always maybe even start with that. You could say, you know, do you realise or understand why I've maybe pulled you up on the left? And they might say, no, I'm not sure, you know. Or, you know, did you realise you cut that corner? Oh yeah, I did actually, yeah. So you can ask them if they actually realised the fault themselves. And also, you might change the circumstance. So had there been a parked car there, that would have been the right thing to do. Yeah, but in this circumstance, there wasn't a parked car there, so we needed to not cut the corner. Yeah, so you know, there's other aspects of that where, you know, it could be that they've turned left and they've gone a bit too wide. You know, and then you've got the danger of going a bit too wide at left turn, or if you're coming out from a side road going left, and if there's cars coming from your left hand side, you're gonna, you know, come into them. But once again, if there was a parked car right there or a big pothole, you might have to avoid that. So in another circumstance, you might have had to come out quite wide. So the point being is, maybe not just focus on the fault itself, but change it around. What if the circumstance was different? How would you deal with it then? Another way of looking at that, or starting that off, would be, let's imagine, or picture the scene. You know, so quite often if you sit in the back of a car on a test, and an examiner is giving some feedback after the test, quite often they'll start that feedback by saying, let's imagine, let's picture the scene. Imagine there's a car behind you. Yeah? How would that change things? Imagine this happened. Let's imagine that happened. How would you change that then? And what you're doing then is you're getting the learner to think a little bit more for themselves. And, oh, I never thought of it like that, actually. You know, so again, the point being is it gets them thinking, and that's really, at the end of the day, that's what you're wanting to achieve. You want them to think, not just to act on what you say to them. Yeah, because people will do what you tell them to do, but they're only doing that because you're telling them to do it. What we want to achieve is that they think for themselves. Let's create drivers that think, yeah, that don't just do what you say. So that's something to consider when you're going through analysis. Try and think of it, and if a learner driver asks you a question, you should 9 times out of 10 usually answer with the same phrase, and that phrase should be, what's your thoughts on that? Before I give you my thoughts, let me hear your thoughts. Because once you get their thoughts on it, that makes it much easier for you to answer that question. Because if you just answer it, no real learning takes place there. They can hear it, but it doesn't really sink in. There's no connections being made in the brain then, really. Yeah. So when a learner driver asks you a question, and not always, it depends on the candidate, it depends on the person, yeah, but most cases, 9 times out of 10, yeah, if someone asks you a question, you answer that with, what's your thoughts on that? And then you get their thoughts. Yeah. From there, once you get their thoughts, you're in a much better place then to answer that. And quite often they'll answer themselves. Yeah. But what they're looking for is a bit of reassurance that they're correct. Yeah. But even by them voicing that, that gives them confidence that they're correct. So they have a bit of belief in what they're thinking. So we're looking at depth to learning. Yeah. Take your analysis a little step further. Yeah. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if it was raining? How would that change things? Yeah. What if the sun was really low in the sky and it was quite blinding so we couldn't see very well? How would that change things? You know, you just create the image, create the scenario, and you can find these situations yourself when you're driving. Yeah, think of it when you're driving. You know, what are you thinking? How is it affecting you? Yeah, and how can that change things? And how does it affect your driving? That all helps you to create these images. Yeah, so that's just something to think about. So quite a short video clip there today, but just really about the depth to the learning. Yeah, and answering questions with, what's your thoughts on that? Yeah, and even the phrase that, if you say, what do you think? It's not quite the same, doesn't quite have the same effect. What do you think? That it doesn't feel that you are actually interested in what they have to say. But if you, and even the tone of your voice sometimes, even the kind of expression on your face, what's your thoughts on that? That actually says to the candidate or the person beside you that you're actually interested in what they have to say. Yeah, and you should be interested in what they have to say. It might not be correct, but at least they're giving you information and there's a bit of communication there, and that's again vital for learning, that there's communication. There's a two-way process, the giving and receiving of information. And then what happens is that conversation creates a whole lot of different avenues. Yeah, and that's where depth to learning comes in. Okay, so just things to consider while you're out there and with your learners, and putting these little things into practice. Try and take it a little step further. Change the circumstance. Take it from a different point of view. Get them to see it from a different point of view. What if they were the cyclist? What if they were the car behind? What if they were the lorry driver? What if you were the one that was overtaking? What would you be thinking? Yeah. So put yourself or put them in the other place. What would their thoughts be then? Yeah. And then again, that creates a conversation and depth to learning. Okay. I'll leave that with you.